It's time now for County-Wide, a presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. You'll hear about the interesting issues and happenings that affect all our lives. Here's today's County-Wide.
Well, good day and welcome to the program. It is County-Wide, and I'm Brad Miller, and we're so happy to welcome a familiar face, though it's been a little while since we have talked with Merilee Fowler, and Merilee with MATForce, synonymous with that organization for so long. So welcome, and good to see you again here in our studio.
Thank you so much, Brad. Thank you for having me.
We've chatted any number of times over the years, both when we did the TV side of County-Wide and now as we do it on the radio. But let's, if we can, I'd like to turn back the old time wheel a tiny bit, because MATForce is coming up on 20 years in existence. Your affiliation with this group almost as long. So let's just kind of talk, maybe for the unfamiliar or those who haven't kind of thought about the origins of MATForce and what the organization is, a little bit about where it's from, why it was formed, and kind of the status of its mission today. So can we do that?
Absolutely. You know, it's probably the number one question that I get is, what does MATForce stand for?
Bingo. And
exactly as you said, it started in 2005 to address the methamphetamine problem in Yavapai County.
Yeah.
And there was a group of leaders, Sheila Polk, the county attorney, the presiding judge, Robert Brutinel, at the time, that were really concerned because crime was on a steady increase. And we were seeing, a lot of crime that was directly related to the methamphetamine problem. So instead of just talking about the problem, they wanted to talk about what are solutions. And so they formed MATForce, which was a group of people from all different sectors of the community that could get together and talk about solutions to the methamphetamine problem, and not just talk about those problems, but also implement strategies and see what they could do to reduce the meth problem.
In my recollection, one of the biggest issues that was happening, and maybe was substantial in giving birth to MATForce, was people making meth at home.
Absolutely.
And acquiring some of the ingredients, the illicit ingredients, pseudoephedrine and those kinds of things, through pharmacies, and some really significant, even historical changes came to Yavapai County through MATForce's work, law enforcement, and just a desire to protect the community.
Absolutely. In fact, one of our claims to fame is that it was Chief Doug Bartosh, the Cottonwood Chief of Police, who had the idea that putting ephedrine behind the counter so that somebody couldn't just go into a CVS or Walgreens and purchase it, but they would have to actually do that through the pharmacist. And so they approached the council to do an ordinance to make that a rule in Cottonwood. Actually, the city attorney advised them not to do that, but they decided to make that ordinance, and Cottonwood was the first municipality that had ephedrine behind the counter. And as we know now, that became a state law, and it's throughout the nation, ephedrine is behind the counter. But it was definitely an environmental strategy that helped to reduce the meth problem.
And the manufacture of meth noticeably went down in Yavapai County.
It did, yes.
Now, when we talk about ephedrine, we're talking common cold medicines that we'll find probably in just about any pantry in America.
Right. Sudafed is the main one, yes, but it's an ingredient in cold medicines and allergy medicine, yes.
And it's another one of those things I've heard everything from kerosene to bleach to so on and so forth, folks kind of concocting on their own in the basement or in the garage or in the RV, like on Breaking Bad, meth. And we I don't hear about it so much anymore. Has it made that big of an impact?
Yes, there hasn't been a meth lab in Yavapai County for, I would say, at least over 10 years.
No kidding.
So now, how meth is coming in now, it's manufactured in big super labs in Mexico and comes across the border. Okay. So it's not what we were seeing in 2005 when MATForce was first formed.
Well, and here we are, you and I, as we kind of shift up a tiny bit. Fentanyl has become the rallying cry these days. It's the thing we seem to hear much more about, certainly what we did back then. As you and I talk here in the third week of August, I see another bus by YCSL.
Absolutely.
Of a fentanyl haul. Is that today's biggest problem?
Absolutely. It's the leading cause of drug overdose deaths in our nation and in Yavapai County. So if we look at, the number of overdose deaths in our county, last year it was close to 60% of those deaths were from fentanyl. So very much a concern that we have right now.
Tell me, if you would share with our listeners, you and I chatted a tiny bit before we opened the microphones, that fentanyl is even trickier because it's not just in the same way a bottle of beer is a bottle of beer. or even a marijuana joint is a marijuana joint. Fentanyl comes in other forms that you're not aware of or may not be aware of.
Right. I think the biggest thing that people need to realize is this is illicit counterfeit fentanyl. So this is not a prescription. Of course, there's fentanyl that you can, if you go to the hospital and you have chronic pain or serious pain that a doctor can give to you. But this is illicit counterfeit fentanyl that is being manufactured by drug dealers. Again, the precursor comes from China. Most of it's manufactured in Mexico. But again, as you mentioned, it comes in many different forms. There's a very common, a blue round pill that looks like an oxycodone pill, but it also can be looks like a Xanax. It can look like an aspirin. I mean, now they're coming up with
whatever they want it to look like.
Absolutely. It comes in, it can be in a powder. So it's really important that people realize that this is just simply a drug that is being sold in our state, in our county, that is for people that have a use disorder to get high. So there's many forms that it comes in. Another thing with fentanyl that's very important to mention, the DEA has done studies on this illicit counterfeit fentanyl, and they say that 6 of 10 of the pills have a deadly dose of fentanyl. So when you think about, again, this isn't done by a pharmaceutical company that's making sure that every pill has the right quantity. 6 of 10 have a deadly dose. And so particularly for somebody that's opioid naive, that hasn't used this drug, they can take the one pill and die. Hence the logo one pill can kill.
Right. So we can, let me get a right perspective on that. Oxycodone typically would be, if I hate to just go straight point to young people, but became a real problem with young people, especially. There are folks who the prescription drug is almost a whole nother show.
Right.
People who get hooked through an initial legal contact and then it gets out of hand. That's kind of a whole different thing. But oxycodone pills, if someone gets them from someone's grandma's bathroom, it's still an oxycodone pill, and it's still going to have most likely been prescribed to someone, and you kind of have a sense of what it is and what it's going to do. If you've taken several in the past, you have a faint idea of what the next one will do. Fentanyl erases all of that.
Absolutely.
Making it much more deadly.
Right. And that is what's made it so dangerous. We were just devastated in 2020 when we had 5 teenagers, 2 14-year-olds that died of fentanyl overdoses. Awful. And again, because they, probably, thought that this was a prescription pill that they were taking. Right. Still something that we don't want to see kids to do, but it was fentanyl and had a deadly dose, and they did not wake up the next morning. So we are in a whole different situation with what's happening with fentanyl.
Fentanyl, let me back up a tiny bit. I thought fentanyl was the practical medical use was as an anesthesia. No, it's a painkiller?
It's a painkiller.
Okay, see, I didn't even know that.
And they do use it, anesthesia, I'm going to say that properly, but they do use it for that, but it's also for pain. So there's a dual purpose for fentanyl.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Oh, boy. Yeah. All right. Well, it's the scourge these days, but there's so much work that MATForce does beyond the flavor of the month, if you will. And I want to explore that a little bit as we talk again with Merilee Fowler, our guest. MATForce, a terrific organization. You can look at the website, is I think matforce.org.
Yes. And
just find out what this program is all about and what its services are and how it might help you. We'll take a break. It's Countywide. We'll be back right after this.
Life changes, then it changes again. Predicting the unexpected in life is impossible. That's why it's called unexpected. So when it comes to financial goals, our philosophy is don't predict, prepare. Hi, I'm Edward Jones financial advisor Matthias Sandoval. A job loss, change in health, or a loss of a loved one can have a big impact on your family's financial security. Let's work together to help make sure you're equipped for life's unexpected events. Call our office to schedule a face-to-face appointment.
Edward Jones, making sense of investing. Member SIPC.
Verde Solaire, your hometown heating, air conditioning, and plumbing company in the Verde Valley. And your trusted North Central Arizona Goodman dealer. Goodman is a name you can trust with the revolutionary Comfort Bridge technology factory installed into select Goodman gas furnaces and air handlers to ensure the entire system operates at peak energy efficient performance. Verde Solaire offers free in-home estimates, locally owned and operated since 1983. Visit them at verdesolaire.com. Better, cleaner, faster.
Hi, this is Louis Rice with Rice Accounting, Jackson Hewitt Tax Service. with a very sincere thank you for your continued business over the last 20 years. All of us at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service are very honored for the many community awards we've been given over the years. As always, we are open year-round, providing services for taxes, payroll, and bookkeeping. Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, located throughout northern Arizona, can help you with all your tax and accounting needs. For our nearest location, call 800-234-1040.
Let's talk. That's the message from Jonna Randall Murdoch, your local Farm Bureau agent, providing a personal touch when making insurance and financial decisions. Jonna will simplify your insurance needs while offering competitive pricing. Let's talk auto, home, life, and farm. Call Jonna at Farm Bureau today at 928-649-8686. Your Cottonwood Farm Bureau Property and Casualty Insurance Company. At Farm Bureau, they insure more than just farms.
We welcome you back to the program. I'm Brad Miller, and with me today, MATForce Director Merilee Fowler, and we appreciate you taking time and coming in and chatting with us. There's a lot to cover. We oftentimes think about MATForce, or I do, think about MATForce as kind of being focused with youth. Now, people can become addicted or abuse drugs, narcotics, whether they're legally intended or not, at any age, obviously. The work early on with the meth and whatnot certainly was because young people were especially affected by that. Is that still true today?
It is 100% true. Our number one focus is youth prevention. And so we're never going to make a decision that would harm that goal that we have. And so, and we have some things to celebrate with youth prevention in Yavapai County and in our state, because if we look at, there's a survey that's done in the schools with 8th, 10th, and 12th grade students, and it's called the Arizona Youth Survey that's done by the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission every even year. And we're very grateful that Yavapai County schools allow that survey to take place. But that's where we gather information such as what drugs are kids using, why they use, why they choose not to use, just a host of different information. But the good news is if we look at that survey throughout the history of MATForce, so even going back to 2004, through 2022, alcohol has been predominantly the number one drug that youth use. And I don't think that's a surprise to anybody.
That's probably true going back 40 years, 50
Absolutely.
years. Yeah, sure.
I think, throughout history, that would be the case. But if we look at 30-day use, so not lifetime use, somebody might say, well, my grandfather gave me a drink of their beer, which of course we don't want them to do that. But that we're counting where kids regularly would use the substance. Okay. So it's an indication of 30-day use. So if we go back to 2004, it was about 35% of the youth in Yavapai County that said that they regularly used alcohol. Fast forward to 2022, it's just over 18%.
That's significant.
It is.
Almost half.
Yes. So a very significant reduction. And we've seen that with other substances too. You mentioned prescription drugs. That was up about 15% in 2010. That's down to less than 3% of kids that say that they have any use of prescription drugs. So we're very thankful for that misuse of prescription drugs, I should say. The other thing that I want to celebrate, because a lot of times, even when we're in the schools, kids, and I think parents think that all kids use drugs. That's not the case. A significant majority make the choice not to. And so we came up with a campaign a few years ago called Stand With Me, Be Drug Free, celebrating Join the Majority. A significant percentage of kids do not abuse and use drugs in our county. So that's something we really want to celebrate.
You think about that and, just how as we go generationally, every decade or so, every generation certainly is going to be different, a totally different kind of thing. When I was young, that sounds awful to say, every movie that came out into the cinemas was about making it, getting some, all of those kinds of things. That's just how it was. Kids in abstinence these days. This is way off the MATForce subject, but I use it to kind of illustrate how one generation of young people is not like any other generation of young people. They're all going to make their own decisions, and it's so encouraging to hear that when it comes to the work of MATForce, clearly there's been a big impact and a big effect, cutting down the drinking by half in a decade or 15 years is extraordinary.
Absolutely.
And I don't know that any of us would have expected that.
Absolutely. And I say all the time, our youth are smart. And I think
yes, they are.
And even if we go back to the fentanyl problem, when I mentioned in 2020 with having young people die, that was something that we wanted to be right away in the schools talking about fentanyl also. And in the years of 2021, 2022, we had no teenagers that died of an overdose, because once they realize the danger of putting that one pill in their mouth, they're going to make the choice most of the time not to do that. And it's the same with, the main substances that they are abusing. So alcohol, vaping has been a big concern in the last few years. That's definitely been a generational change with, cigarette smoking has gone way down, but in place, they think that vaping is now a safe thing to do. And so working very hard just to educate them on the true risks and harms and talking about how it affects their future. And I do believe, again, that kids are going to make good choices if they're just given the information to make those choices.
Right. Now, when you're talking vaping, you're not talking marijuana, you're talking tobacco.
Well, both.
Okay.
So, the vaping devices, you can either put, nicotine or cannabis, marijuana in them. And so that's one of the things that we hear a lot about in the schools. And again, we have a whole curriculum just on the risks of vaping. It's simply not true that people think that it's a safer thing to do. They're still putting that substance in their lungs, and they're finding more and more research of the harms. And again, we just want to educate kids, of the true. It's an addictive drug. That's the other thing. Parents a lot of times are saying, "I can't get my child to quit vaping." Well, we have to explain to them they're addicted to that substance that they're vaping, and there's a whole process that you're going to have to go through to help them, to get well from that addiction. So
you mentioned that addiction. I'm thinking, okay, you're talking tobacco or marijuana, and there would be plenty that would say, well, tobacco very much is addictive. Marijuana, not so much. Marijuana psychologically can be much more addictive.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. What they say, and going back, Brad, to when we talk about youth prevention, that's the other thing that we know is that when kids start using a substance earlier, they are much more likely to develop that addiction or use disorder. And so that's one of the reasons that we want them, number one, to be healthy, it's a good choice never to start using those drugs, but particularly with adolescent brain. If you talk to treatment facilities, it's like 9 of 10 people that are in treatment started as a teenager. So that's I think something that we really need to take a good hard look at. And your question with marijuana, kids they're much more at risk to become addicted to marijuana if they start young. I mean, that's statistically proven. Now, again, is it as addictive? I don't think it's as addictive as nicotine, but it is an addictive drug that people will psychologically and also will have some physical addictions to. So it's a fact.
Well, you think about how peer pressure kind of changes. It might peak even in junior high school, through high school. Once you kind of get some of those milestones, high school graduation, 18, 19 years of age, and go on, there's still peer pressure. There is throughout our lives, but it definitely seems to change. And as we mature, we understand it a little bit better. And it seems like once you can get out of the high school range, some of those pressures from your peers, at least, will start to diminish, especially if you've kind of swum in a clear stream up to that point.
Absolutely. And again, I think that's why we have, a number one goal is to just educate these kids and parents also, and so that they can make good choices in their teen years in middle school and high school.
Some of the numbers I can't help but notice kind of tie into the COVID period. Did MATForce, through study and statistics, determine did COVID cause any spikes or any real problems? We were all staying home.
Right.
Were we drinking and smoking?
One statistic that really came to the forefront during COVID is I mentioned that survey that the schools will allow the kids to take also ask the kids that say that they are regular users of these substances why they're using. And I think, the number one reason that's not a surprise to have fun or to get high. But following that is to deal with stress. That's a predominant reason why people use, or to not feel sad. And of course, as you've reported on and has been so true, there's been this increase in kids struggling with their mental wellness. Right. And I think that COVID had a huge impact on that. And so again, what we're trying to teach kids is it's not going to help you to feel better. It might be a short-term high, but the long-term effects of, any type of drug, it leads to further depression and anxiety down the road. And so that is definitely something that we saw a spike in related to COVID.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the impacts of COVID, there's the sniffly, coughing, and all of those kinds of the physical illness and the ailments. Killed 1.5 million people in the country. That was awful. It's not done. But I do believe, and I think a lot of people at this point would agree with a lot of the numbers and the opinions coming in of the bigger socioeconomic impact of COVID has not even begun to be felt yet.
Absolutely.
And some of the things you've described, and almost everybody would describe it similarly. Talk to me a little bit about a program. I don't know if this was developed by MATForce, but I associate the two very closely, and that's Dump the Drugs.
Yes. So Dump the Drugs, actually, we got to give credit to Graham County. So the Graham County Substance Abuse Coalition, one of their members had the idea, it was at the height of the prescription drug problem around 2008, that they thought that they would host an event where people could bring their unnecessary or outdated prescription medications to be properly disposed of. And so it was actually somebody associated with Yavapai Broadcasting that had the idea, had seen that and said, let's do that in Yavapai County. But where MATForce, we went a little bit further, and it was at the time Chief Jody Fanning, who was the Cottonwood Chief of Police. The very first Dump the Drugs that we did, we collected over 400 pounds in Cottonwood of prescription medication. We were just floored by the response and people saying, I didn't know what to do with this. And so Chief Fanning actually said, you know what, I think that we should start taking these medications at our police department so that people could drop them off during business hours. And so now throughout the nation, there are drop boxes. In Yavapai County, we have 15 drop boxes because it's legal for police departments to take these medications back since there's controlled substances and then properly dispose of those. So there's the two benefits. Number one, to get these medications out of the hands of somebody that might, be abusing them, youth, that might want to experiment with getting high, and then also for environmental reasons, keeping it out of our water. So, we keep a log. We've been keeping this log since 2008, and we're getting close to the 40,000 pound mark of prescription medications that our law enforcement agencies have collected and properly disposed of.
That is extraordinary.
It is. It's pretty crazy.
That is a success.
Yeah.
One of many for MATForce. All right. We need to take a short break. I would tell you that we are going to do a second part with Merilee. We've kind of covered here in our first show of two a lot of history where MATForce has come from, and I want to kind of focus on what's happening today and what is to come. There's some interesting new programs that Merilee Fowler will tell us about on our next segment next time we meet on Countywide. For now, we're going to stop. We'll come back. We'll wrap up today's show, give that website some other information real quick, and then another program with Merilee Fowler, MATForce. It's Countywide, and we're back right after this.
Life changes, then it changes again. Predicting the unexpected in life is impossible. That's why it's called unexpected. So when it comes to financial goals, our philosophy is don't predict, prepare. Hi, I'm Edward Jones financial advisor Matthias Sandoval. A job loss, change in health, or a loss of a loved one can have a big impact on your family's financial security. Let's work together to help make sure you're equipped for life's unexpected events. Call our office to schedule a face-to-face appointment.
Edward Jones, making sense of investing. Member SIPC.
Verde Solaire, your hometown heating, air conditioning, and plumbing company in the Verde Valley, and your trusted North Central Arizona Goodman dealer. Goodman is a name you can trust with the revolutionary Comfort Bridge technology factory installed into select Goodman gas furnaces and air handlers to ensure the entire system operates at peak energy efficient performance. Verde Solaire offers free in-home estimates, locally owned and operated since 1983. Visit them at verdesolaire.com. Better, cleaner, faster.
Hi, this is Lewis Rice with Rice Accounting, Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, with a very sincere thank you for your continued business over the last 20 years. All of us at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service are very honored for the many community awards we've been given over the years. As always, we are open year-round, providing services for taxes, payroll, and bookkeeping. Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, located throughout northern Arizona, can help you with all your tax and accounting needs. For our nearest location, call 800-234-1040.
Let's talk. That's the message from Jonna Randall Murdoch, your local Farm Bureau agent, providing a personal touch when making insurance and financial decisions. Jonna will simplify your insurance needs while offering competitive pricing. Let's talk auto, home, life, and farm. Call Jonna at Farm Bureau today at 928-649-8686. Your Cottonwood Farm Bureau property and casualty insurance company. At Farm Bureau, they insure more than just farms.
We welcome you back. Our final segment in the first of two programs in a row with Merilee Fowler, Executive Director, MATForce, and for a long time now. How long? MATForce been here 19 years.
Yeah, I've been here for over 17 years.
Okay, so you've been doing it pretty much since the get-go, and certainly under your leadership, MATForce has become something known not just in our community, and we're lucky to have it in Yavapai County in northern Arizona, but literally across the nation, certainly throughout the state of Arizona and bordering states, but all over the country. Things have come out of MATForce that have been adopted successfully by law enforcement and people who care across the country. If someone has a question, perhaps, I don't know if you need volunteers or those kinds of things, but how do they get a hold of you?
Well, we have a website that they can learn more information, and that's matforce.org, MATForce. And they could also call our office. Our number is 928-708-0100.
Very good. All right. Merilee Fowler, it's the first of a two-parter. We'll continue to talk. I want to talk a little bit when we come back about a number of things, some interesting programs that have sprung up from MATForce. We'll do that for sure. I do want to visit a little bit on the opioid crisis. We mentioned it here in our first segment. I want to jump into that a tiny bit more, and we'll do that with our guest Merilee Fowler and MATForce. It's countywide, and we'll see you next time.
This has been Countywide. Listen in each Tuesday and Thursday at this time. If you have a topic or guest idea that you'd like to suggest, email us, news@myradioplace.com.